Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. You are here at the Used Car Marketing Strategies webcast session. Today is Thursday, April 4th. My name is Ryan Girardi. I have a couple of fine gentlemen on with us as well, which I'll introduce in just a moment. We are here to talk about wholesale sourcing, dependability. It's based really off of an article that was published recently on Auto Dealer Today, titled Three Ways to Ensure Wholesale Sourcing Dependability. So I've got Jason Rice on here from Lot Pop and retired automotive exec Gary May. And so we're going to get started. I said Gary May, didn't I?
You did. Yeah.
Gary Wade.
Thank you.
We know Gary May too, but yeah.
I know that's funny. I'm like, so I apologize to both Garys.
Shout out to Gary May.
That happened. So welcome, gentlemen. Great to see you here.
Thanks
for having
Good
us.
to see you guys.
Now, Gary was on with me last month, and we really got into the investment potential and profitability of mostly of some of the disruptors out there. That podcast is out there, and I'll mention that later in the episode. And Jason's been on here a couple of times, and appreciate taking the time. Jason, I just got to see each other last week in Denver.
Yes, we did. That was a good time.
Good time. I actually got a little sick after the fact. I thought I caught Mike's cold, but it really, I think the climate change, I went from, being a mile high in mountain time zone,
60-degree weather almost.
Yep. And then I had to fly to Detroit, but I had two stopovers along the way, Austin and then St. Louis. And by the time I got to Detroit, it'd been 8 hours in transit, and it was muggy and late. And I ended up kind of dealing with allergies all day Saturday and Sunday, but feeling good now and did not get the flu.
'Tis the season for allergies.
Yeah, seasonal's coming in. So we're going to get started in a minute. I'll go through the article. Today's webcast is brought to you by Vehicle Acquisition Network. Vehicle Acquisition Network, or VAN as it is shortened, is we're really proud and honored to have their support in what we do. VAN helps connect dealers with private sellers. They have a platform that's designed to find vehicles that are listed by private sellers, and their technology as a way for dealers to connect with those customers, and then they work with dealers on buying cars from consumers. And so we appreciate Van's support. And if you want more information about Vehicle Acquisition Network, you can go to buywithvan.com. That's BUY, buywithvan.com. So, gentlemen, let me get things started here. The article that Jason had shared was written by Jim Lehman, Three Ways to Ensure Wholesale Sourcing Dependability. I'll read his tips off. One was stop stocking up. So we'll speak to that. He talks about pinpointing your best sellers and then leveraging your dealer sources. Jason, you're familiar with Jim Lehman's work and his writings?
Yeah, he does articles. I mean, for years he's been doing that. And so he's really in tune with the industry. I know he does work, like press releases and stuff for dealers too, or for vendors. But yeah, he's really in tune to what's going on out there. You'll see his stuff pretty much on every source out there.
Okay. All right. So he gets into, when it comes to wholesale used cars, the challenge it's not necessarily a scarcity of volume. There's plenty of cars out there, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think the dealer's not complaining so much, not what's out there, but what they got to pay to get them, so there's plenty of cars out there. With a conspiracy theory, so don't quote me on this, I do think OEMs are sitting on them somewhere, or some of the banks are too, but that's just a theory. But yeah, there's plenty of them out there, and it's just a matter of if you're willing to pay for the money or not.
So what do you think of his three tips? I mean, are they solid? Are you in accord with all of them? Do you disagree with any of his tips?
and Gary can chime in too on this part. I think on the stop stocking up, I don't like a 45-day sale rate. I like carry what you sell what you carry. You get 100 cars, sell 100 cars. You can even push it a little bit higher than that. We kind of changed our algorithm. Instead of telling dealers, here's, a 45-day supply metrics and saying, here's what you sold in the last 45 days, and this is how many you need. We actually changed it to their average sale days. So we have some dealers that average sales is 27 days. So we look at what's sold in the last 27 days, or no, we're looking at a stocking level for 27 days, not, giving them a 45-day strategy, because I don't want to I think right now, going into April and May tends to slow down. Tax season starts to wind down and spring hits and everybody's busy doing things. And we're going to hit a little bit of a wall where things start slowing down, but guys are buying like it's still March levels, and they're going to be surprised come mid-April and beginning of May, year after year after year. I talk to dealers and they're like, man, who turned off the faucet? We've had to, things were going great. And so when they overstock, they're starting getting buried, and then they pay top dollars because March was a great month. Everybody's trying to buy cars and they're paying top dollar. And then come May and June, April, May, when it slows down, the only way to drive traffic sometimes is get aggressive with your price, but the margin's not there because of what you paid for them, but they start bleeding through. But, Gary, I don't know what your habit. I know you're talking about buying, wholesaling or buying cars for dealers, if you've had the same mindset on that or not. But
it's something that this year is very peculiar with the tax law changes. I think we saw a real difficult February and March in a lot of different areas in the country. With the millions of people and families that aren't getting the tax returns this year that they've gotten in the past, and also with some having to pay quite a bit more than what they've done traditionally in the past. It's put a real crunch on a couple different levels. One, on the new car end, obviously there's not the trades coming in that were into the dealers in the past, so it's shortening some inventories that way as far as trades, but also the supply that you talked about earlier is really skewed, and we're going to see a big change in inventory levels. And like you mentioned, out of some of the manufacturers and the captive lease sources that we see come due really in May and June, we're going to see a big influx of leases coming back in off the market that are 3-year maturing now this spring. So I think dealers really have to be a little cautious right now. One, did they carry a little too much inventory into the February, March, expecting a stronger February, March used car retail sales, and then having some aged inventory sitting around right now that could bite out of the profit margin pretty substantially because it's getting timed, but also watching how things go the next 30 days and being cautious so they could go into that return off lease market and some of that 3-year 30,000, mid 30,000 mile inventory that's so sought after. So, the rental cars, the commodity cars, the cars like that are always available. I mean, those cars are always available, especially coming off of this time of year. Don't get caught up in those. They compete with your new cars so dramatically right now, price wise. Everything everyone's looking for is that 3-year older, lower mile, everything that people are talking about that is, worth its weight in gold is that 65 to 75 to 85,000 mile 4-year-old, 5-year-old unit that they can retail in the 10 grand to 12 grand price range. I think if you're setting yourself up to be able to really go after those units in the near future, you've really got to trim down right now.
So the seasonal effect is going to vary from where you are geographically. It sounds like spring break tends to force as spring starts to come around the corner. It sounds like it slows down for everybody, but then once spring gets going and roll into summer, it starts to pick back up, and that seems pretty universal.
Yeah, I think if you ever remember, manufacturers and advertising, you always see summer sales events happening. So Gary's right. You know, I was looking at 16 trends, and I'm pretty confident it happens year after year. But January for new car sales, January, February, March picks up, and then April and May it drops down, and then July, August it picks back up for summer sales events, and that's when those lease incentives are big and everything. And so yeah, these cars are going to start coming in April, May, and June, because some people can get out a little early and stuff. And then July, August, we're going to have probably an abundance of some of those cars hitting those. I do think there's a little bit of a seasonal trend on years though, Gary, because tell me if you agree with this or not, but I've been noticing trends. Like I had a bunch of dealers struggling with, 17s and 18s in December and January, and November and December and January. What happened was, like a Honda store in particular, Honda forced all these loaner cars and everything out into the dealer's lot. And so and all these 18s, in the meantime, they had such big incentives and rebates on these 18s on new ones, they couldn't sell the used ones. I do think right about now, between April and May and June range, mid-June, by June, I would probably want to get off of them, is late models might be okay because the 18s are probably mostly gone. The 19s don't have great incentives yet. So if somebody's looking for a fairly new car, you might be okay on 18s right now. But before that July, August summer sale season hits, you probably want to get off those because now you're competing against the 19s and those big incentives. But once that kind of dies down going into September, October, you might play in that market a little bit, another month or two, but you're off of it by November, December because they got the end of the year clearance stuff going out. So there might be some seasonal playing around with those late models because those do get you better trades a lot of times. More than likely people are going to finance them. More than likely they don't take a lot of turnaround time and recon dollars. So there's a little bit of appeal to those late models, but you don't want to get jammed up with them when when the manufacturer is getting rid of these new ones. And that'll happen June, or probably more July, August, but June, July, August, and start backing off of those at that point in time. I don't know if you agree with that again.
Yeah, you hit a couple of real critical points early on. You said about the trends from 3 years ago in 2016, and it was a real strong early winter and into the new year with some great incentives and some great lease deals that they had at that time. But you have to remember that those cars are 90 days turn by the time they get to market. So if they were a lease that was written in January, ended in the end first of the year, it's usually by the time they get to market from the manufacturers off the dealers' lots to the sales, and then from the dealers onto the inventory, you're looking the end of March. So you really have to play that 90-day cycle out when you look at that type of historical information. And same thing going into this summer when you look at the big summer sell-a-thons and things like that the manufacturers push and really incentivize to clear the lot so that the dealers order new car inventory for the fall. That stuff is going to hit dealers' availability about September 30th to October 1st. So you have to try to play the timing game with that and see where you're going to be in your market. Here in the upper Midwest, obviously, we have a strong end of the fall, but by November 1st, you're really looking to cut back on inventories because of the winter season. Where right now we're just really coming out of the thaw. Here in the Twin Cities, we just lost our snow piles in the last week. So, you have a lot of dealers that just freed up 60, 70 parking spots on their lots in the last 10 days. So the availability of putting on some inventory right now is paramount. But, you'd love to have been able to buy it in January and February to have it for a majority of the country. And that's where you have to look at how you're really putting together a list of things that are your hottest inventories, are moving fast, have your largest profit margins, and something that you can bring your turn up on very quickly. So as you go into your spring and summer markets.
Gentlemen, if we could shift into more the specific sourcing techniques. I know in Lehman's second point, he's talking about pinpointing your best sellers, but keeping the focus on let's move in like to his third point about the digital sources. And he brings up Odessa, ACV auctions, Mannheim. And by the way, I met Stu Zalad from ACV auctions at IDS. I don't know if you got a chance to talk with him. And I had meant to invite him up here, and I just, one thing led to another. We got you guys here, so we'll have to have Stan on at some point. But how are these digital sources, and how are they playing out for dealers? Is it saving money? Is it saving time? Is it getting them better cars?
Gary, I don't know if you want to chime in or you want me to.
One of the things that, as I talk to a lot of dealers, one of the things that in today's market with the digital sources, if you can buy blocks of cars to cover your commodity cars and out of the rental fleets and things like that, to fill that market niche, it's important. But to go after in volume and compete against some of the what we call the disruptors, the large, the CarMax and now Carvana and some of the other larger retailers, to compete with them in the digital buying off auctions is so tough. I mean, you're proxy bidding thousands and thousands of cars a week, and the time for your team is to do that is so consuming. That's why having somebody like yourself, Jason, that gives them a very focused game plan and a very focused buy list and things that they need to go after is so critical in today's market, to be able to know exactly data is driving your matrices and what you're going to purchase and what you're going to go after. So pinpointed is so important, because you get lost in a mire of what's going on in the electronic buying circle, and your people can be spending days on days proxy bidding on cars that you'll never touch, you'll never see.
Yeah. And that's what, with the digital sourcing, I mean, there shouldn't be any excuses of why you can't get cars. I mean, you have access to cars all across the country. I guess our biggest challenge is, and kind of off key to this, but it has to do with the point, is they buy them, and either locally or regionally, a lot of times dealers do just out of sheer time, because they don't have time to look all over the place and then deal with the transportation and lining it up and dealing with weather and stuff like that. So that a lot of times they buy locally or regionally at best. But they got to understand too, with that digital sourcing and people be able to buy, a lot of dealers, when you retail a car, it's a local market, meaning there's not too many people. They'll drive an hour or two for the right car, but maybe regional. You might get that regional. Every once in a while, you'll have a national car. What I mean by that is maybe a hard to come by Dodge Viper that's 10 years old with 10,000 miles you put on eBay, and somebody from California drives, flies to Kansas to buy it. But more than likely, you're dealing with when you retail, a local market, regional at best. But when you go to the lane, you're dealing with a national market. So what they're selling for in Texas is irrelevant to what you got to price it for in your market. So that gets the tricky part. You got to really know where you got to price that car and back yourself into those bids as you're buying those cars remotely on these sources. Because just because you pay for it, if I'm in Kansas, just because I paid that kind of money for it in Florida to shipped it to you, doesn't mean I can just mark it up and hope to make a profit. I got to look at my local market, because it might be worth more money in Florida, and I stepped up on it and ended up owning it. And now I'm in the market that really don't care about this car. So you really got to know your local regional market, bid the car according to that. And then if you can still ship it in and save some money or break even, sourcing them that way. But I think that's the biggest challenge to get dealers to realize. Retail's local, regional at best. Wholesale's national. It's even global market, because heck, I mean, guys coming from Russia buying, black Mercedes and shipping them over there. That stuff happens, So it's almost a global market. It's a little bit trickier, but you shouldn't have any reasons why you can't find cars, because they're everywhere.
It's funny you say that about the global market. I had an old Land Rover years ago, and I really wanted out. Yeah, I really wanted out of it. And, it wasn't worth anything at the time. Gas prices were so high, and the dealers, and I had good, close relationships with dealers, and they're like, man, they couldn't even wholesale the thing. Well, luck would have it, I'm in there because they were a client of mine. Their buyer comes in and he's like, "What's up with that Land Rover?" And they're like, "It's his. He wants to get rid of it. He wants to get out of it." And they had me leave the room. And they brought me back in, and he said, he's going to give you $8,000 for the Land Rover. And I go, huh? I don't even owe that much on it. And he goes, don't ask any questions. He's going to give you $8,000 for it. I'm like, deal. And flipping my car right there. But that was what they were doing. They were shipping it overseas. He was going to probably sell it for $12,000.
Did you ever, I know I posted this article, but it was years ago. You ever hear about that plumber? The guy sold his truck.
No.
His logo was still on the truck. The truck ended up on the news, like in Fox News or somebody's pictures of it. And they're terrorists with missile launchers shooting out the bed of the truck with his logo on it. So people are like, are you part of the terrorists? So this is a local plumber and his car is over there and it's on the news with his logo on it. The dealer didn't even take the logos off or nothing when they took it and wholesaled it. So it's in another country in a terrorist attack.
There's a takeaway for you. Get the logo off your cars before you move them.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to wind things down if I could. And one of the resources mentioned in the article is competitive inventory acquisitions. And Jason, I know you've mentioned them a couple of times. Right. They have over 200,000 vehicles in their database. Do you know where those vehicles are? They acquiring them, holding them, and then redistributing, or are they just connecting?
Yeah, I think they're connecting them to them. You know, they're the ones that can do the legwork that the dealers typically don't have. You know, they don't have the time to sit there and weed through thousands of cars across the country. So, you know, they do take a deeper dive into what the dealer's selling. You know, historically, we do that for our clients, you know, year, make, model, trim. Here's how many you had, how many you sold. You know, we look a little bit deeper, making sure they're selling fast and there's profit on them. You know, some of the systems, even though they say historically you've sold these, so get more of these, if they're not selling faster than 30 days and we're not making any money on them, do I really want to duplicate that problem? So yeah, I mean, they're going to get that deeper dive into what you need and then be able to source them and do the legwork. It just takes a lot of work to weed through all this crap. No matter what system you have, you know, Viato does a great job with Stockwave. It's just click, 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 and boom, here's some cars. You still got to go through them though. You just never know. It's a lot of time.
So of all these platforms that are listed, again, there was Stockwave, ACV, CIA, all of those, the cars and the systems are all either at auction or sitting on a dealer lot. None of them include, say, consumer vehicles out on the market, right?
No, again, that's where your company that sponsored this was kind of interesting. Their approach with that, because that's a good way for dealers to not have to go to lane, is try to find some private sellers, you know. 3 ways I attack my inventory: get your stocking process or your appraisal for trade-ins, get that process humming, efficient. How many you've done, how many you take in, which managers, which salespeople do a good job, which ones do a bad job, when should I TO a trade, how many I take in, how many did I step up. Get that process is one. Second step would be private sellers. Start sourcing them out of your service department. 1, 2, start sourcing them from private sellers and offer to buy people's cars like the CarMax does. And then 3, finally go to the lane if you have to. So, you know, I hear a lot of dealers complain, I can't go to the lane, and they want too much money for it. In the meantime, they don't try to outsource it through their service department and private sellers, or offered to buy cars or advertise it. And their appraisal process is crap. So they got to fine tune those 2 things, because I always like to control what we could control, and you can control those 2 things, and then you can't control the auction. So that's the last place you want to try to source.
Yeah. You know, I was just reminded, sorry, Gary, I'll swing in a second, but Ricky Bomar, who was on with us a few months ago, you know, he mentioned something he does is when he's looking at these cars being auctioned and sees what they're going for, if he can find them off the street and just move them wholesale, he'll do that too. So it's not like we have to just get cars to sell retail. If you can get a car off the street and move it wholesale, then and make a few bucks, and go ahead and do that too.
Yeah. That was one of the big things that I did before I retired with the last group I was in. I mean, obviously the acquisition off the street was the whole thing that I worked with. And with Van software being able to make that available and make that possible, the biggest thing was, you know, you want to get the cars for retail for your stores, but to be able to really look at maximizing everything, the wholesale opportunities, being able to look at every vehicle and know that you can buy it, whether you're going to retail it or wholesale it. You just have to have the mentality of knowing what you're going to do with the car before you make the buying decision. So if you're buying it for retail, buy it for retail. If you're buying it for wholesale, buy it for wholesale, and have a plan for it before you pull the trigger. So that's so critical in today's market, knowing where you're going to go at it when you're appraising it, having a proper appraisal process, using it on every vehicle with your management, and then and really making sure that they're keeping into the matrices that you set in your, whether it's vAuto or First Look, whatever software that you're using. So when people get cowboy and they try to go out of it too far is when you take a beating on it. So
100%.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for getting up here and doing this with us again. I'm going to go ahead and wind things down and just do some closing things. But thanks again for being here. It's great to talk with you both.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Gary.
Thanks again.
All right, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to oh, yeah. And this is the first time you guys got to kind of meet virtually, at least, which is something I love about what we do, is get to make friends over the zeros and ones, over the digital airwaves. So hang tight, guys. I'm going to just do some closing announcements, and then I'll shut down the webcast. So folks, again, we do this every month, pretty much by default on the first Thursday of each month. This is the Used Car Marketing Strategies webcast. As you can see, we stream it live. It's recorded. It's always available up on our YouTube channel. And then we release it out onto the AutoConverse podcast. In fact, I had mentioned at the beginning, Gary, Wade, and I were on last week, and that podcast is up. It's called Market Growth Usurps Profit for Disruptors. And really the summary of that conversation was the fact that Carvana, while it's losing close to $200 million a quarter, they seem to be still garnering attention and support and wanting to grow. They have some ambitious goals despite the profitability, and that seems to be what's more important right now, at least for their class. But we'll see how that pans out. Something that we stay on regularly. So yeah, search for the AutoConverse podcast to have that to listen to these episodes on your preferred podcast app. You can also go up to autoconverse.com, and there's a used car section, and all these previous episodes are up there as well. What we do is we reduce the recording down to about a 3-minute video, put that up there along with the podcast, and you can get that. So subscribe to autoconverse.com to have that information sent to you as it comes out. I'm Ryan Girardi. Again, Jason Rice from Lot Pop and Gary Wade, our insider automotive exec from the Twin Cities. And get registered if you're not already, and make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Again, today's show is brought to you by the Vehicle Acquisition Network, connecting private sellers with dealers, not for your average dealer. Go to buywithvan.com. Have a great afternoon. We're going to go ahead and shut down. Thanks, everyone.